Abraham Maslow was a famous American psychologist that developed theories specifically pertaining to human motivation. Maslow discovered that all humans, despite location or socioeconomic status, had basic needs that are all the same, and he broke them into 5 categories. The first being physiological: breathing, food, water, sex, sleep. The next being safety. So that's the security of a person's body or a person's family, whether or not they have shelter. The next is love and belonging. So whether or not they have a family or friendship or other deep relationships. Esteem, which is being able to be seen and respected by others and being to respect others as well. It comes with whether or not a person has confidence in who they are and whether they have good self-esteem. And lastly was self-actualization. And all that means is that a person is able to understand who they truly are and able to accept that and to continue to grow as a person. So he developed this hierarchy of needs that each human being on earth has. And it's broken into those categories. His theory was that each person needs to have each of these levels fulfilled before they can move on to another higher level, ultimately ending in self-actualization. So them being able to understand who they truly are as a person and to be able to accept who they are and see themselves in the world. Many times, individuals move up and down this hierarchy multiple times through life, and it just depends on the circumstances that they find themselves in. Many times individuals can be between levels, working on 2 at the same time. It's important to note that as individuals, we move up and down this pyramid multiple times through our life, and that self-actualization isn't actually a permanent stasis, but something that we achieve on and off throughout an entire life cycle. The 4 bottom levels are considered deficiency levels. And all this means is that if a person is deficient in those levels, meaning if they have not had those needs met, that they will be motivated to find a way to satisfy those needs. And the longer a person goes without those needs, the stronger that desire to fulfill that need is. So you can imagine this as a person who is hungry. When a person is hungry, if they're not fed, then that hunger continues to grow. Or sleep. If you're lacking sleep, then you don't get less tired the longer you don't sleep. You actually get more tired. So you can imagine it like that. The top level, self-actualization, is a growth level, and that once all those other levels are met, that person can begin being creative and understanding who they are and being able to see the potential that they have in the world and how they affect the world and how their life affects everything else. This self-actualization level is actually where a lot of this learning takes place, and a lot of reasons why your students are in that classroom is because they want to be able to use this new language that you're teaching them so that they can grow as a person and they can see themselves in the world that they're now living in, whether it's abroad or whether it's for a job. But self-actualization is that place where people grow in who they are. So why is Maslow's hierarchy of needs important to us as teachers? Well, you can think of these lower levels as bricks, and each of those unmet needs actually pile up onto one another, building up a gigantic wall between the learner and their education, or the learner and you. And so you can imagine all of these physiological and safety needs not being met, and those things building up in front of a person and getting in the way of them achieving the things that they want to achieve. So we recently talked about another invisible wall called an affective filter when we studied Stephen Krashen. And this wall, you can imagine, stands between the learner and the teacher and blocking all form of instruction or communication between the student and the teacher, getting in the way of what the student needs to understand in the classroom. All of our learners come into the classroom with various needs. They may even come in with a host of unmet needs. And our job as teachers is to be able to see where our students are struggling. And it could be physiologically, they could be hungry, or they could have not slept for a long time, or maybe if you're working in a refugee camp that they have just been relocated to, and there's a lot of stressors that come with that as well. And so they come into your classroom, and your job as a teacher is to identify those things, much like Maslow did. And in turn, you're essentially breaking down barriers as a teacher between a learner and their education. So how do we break down these invisible walls? Well, we can look at a student's needs. We can look at those things that Maslow talked about, the physiological needs and the safety needs and the love and belonging and the security. And we can think of how do we as teachers have an ability to break down those barriers for our students. Maybe your students are hungry and there's a real felt need in you bringing food and snacks to the classroom. Or maybe it's them not having supplies and resources at home, and you become that person who is able to give out those supplies or rally the troops to bring those supplies to your students. Or maybe they're intangible things like love. Maybe they come from an abusive background. How are you as a teacher going to address those things? Those aren't real tangible things, but they are felt needs. And so think of the things that you think they may need. Do some research if you need to find out what are some of the obstacles that stand in the way of your students getting all that they can from their education. And then how are you as a teacher going to react to those needs? How are you going to help break down those walls for your students? To best illustrate this idea of an invisible wall, I actually want to show you some real walls that have been painted by a famous street artist named Banksy. So we look at these pictures and we see very real walls in front of people, in front of camps, and between nations. And what he's done is he has taken very real walls that have been placed up between people, and he has broken down those barriers by painting pictures of the possibilities that could be on the other side. And painting a new picture for people to look at, as if, what if that wall was not actually there? What if it looked radically different? We want you as teachers to look at this invisible wall that your students have. And we want you to break down the barriers that stand between them and their education. We want you to be like Banksy in a way, and to allow students to see the possibilities on the other side of the wall that they're facing. To help them either climb up over that wall or to punch holes through it, whatever it takes for your students. We want you to recognize what they need and to do your best as a teacher to supply what they need. So what we want you to do is we want you to think of 5 things that your students need. What I want you to do is to grab a sheet of paper out and a pen. And I want you to draw a line right down the middle of it. And on the left side column, I want you to label it areas I want to help my students. And on the right, I want you to write how I plan to help. And I want you to write down 5 things. And I want you to think specifically about your students that you want to teach. And what 5 things, what 5 areas are you wanting to help your students? What do you see them needing? And then how do you actually plan on helping? Sometimes we have the best intentions, but without action, intentions are nothing. And so this is kind of setting up a way for you to actively participate in helping your students. What areas do you want to help your students? Think specifically about your students. Wherever you want to teach, wherever you want to go, what are their needs? And how do you want to address them? So for me, I want to work with refugees who have been displaced by war. And some of those very real needs that they have are relationships. Many people who have fled violence lack family and other relationships that they've had for a lifetime. And so how I plan on helping is being a consistent person in their life. Another area where they may struggle, where I think I could possibly help, is by giving them access to education. How I plan on helping this particular area is not just bringing any form of education, but one that specifically addresses their needs. So, as all TESOLites, I want to bring hope through education that is specific to their needs. And I want you to think of 3 more things for whoever your people are that you want to teach. And then we're going to do an activity. So keep these close to you, because we're going to do something with them in just a moment. All right, so take your lists and we are going to have a chance to create something together. So the areas that I want to help my students are actually the bricks in this wall. So that left-hand column, I want you to think of as the bricks. Those ways that we want to help are actually the places, this blue that you see, where we break down that wall that divides them and us and allows them to experience their education. So again, for relationships and those who struggle with relationships, I want to be a consistent person. For those that lack education, I actually want to bring hope through education. Those with low self-esteem, I actually want to be a person who encourages them. Those who have faced trauma, I want to have active listening when they are telling me their stories. And those with physical handicaps due to war or just from birth, I want to be a person who prays for healing. So even though this is an invisible wall, these bricks are very real. And as citizens of hope, we are called to break down all barriers that divide humans. And so let's do that. Let's find those places where walls have been built up and let's tear them down. Let's help our students see what's on the other side of those walls, to imagine the possibilities, to help them overcome those obstacles that they face. And let's do it together.